Well, I'm happy to be here. Hopefully you'll be happy after I'm done and feel like you got something out of it. As Mackenzie said, I work here at Utah State. I'm actually in development. I've been in development for about 4 years. That's fundraising, alumni relations, and that type of thing. I'm with the College of Engineering. I got my degree at Utah State in the early 80s in marketing and started off out of school working in electronics. I worked in small electronics firms that grew and did quite well. That was an evolving business back in the 80s, and it changed a lot. And with that came a lot of competition and a lot of changes. I was in that business for about 8 years, and then I found myself laid off. So I was in a situation where I needed to find something. And you know, they say your best route for finding a job is your connections, people you know and things like that. Actually, I found my next career opportunity in the newspaper. So I answered an ad, and I took a commission job where it was basically all commission, and it was in the amusement industry and selling amusement rides with a new startup company in northern Utah. And it's kind of a risky thing, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. I knew this was a reputable guy that was starting this company. So I jumped on board and I took a gamble, and it paid off quite well. Started working with a small-end recreational equipment, and that evolved into some major equipment, which is the S&S Sports Company, which is the tower rides and the coasters and things like that. And so over the course of about 5 years, in the early 90s, we took that business from 0 sales to 40 million in sales, and it was quite a ride, you know, literally quite a ride. It was a lot of fun. The commission-based part of it really paid off well for me. So it was a bit of a gamble, but in the end it paid off quite well. I guess the point I'll try to make as I go through here is there's a lot of opportunities in business. You just have to investigate them and make sure it's the right thing for you, and then you need to work hard where you do end up and try and make things happen. So I've started businesses, and I've worked for owners of businesses, and I've worked my way into stock ownership in businesses. So I've got a variety of things that I'll be talking about today. But anyway, I'll go through a little bit about this. I was a sales manager of this company, the S&S company, and worked for them for a number of years. A great experience. The other thing I did, being a young company, we were doing very well financially, but we didn't have a lot of people. We kept the business small. We subcontracted a lot of the large manufacturing, which meant there were just a small team of us that did the inside work. And my job was sales, marketing, advertising, trade shows, everything as sales manager. So I kind of did it all, which was a great experience. The positive or negative, however you look at it, was that I was traveling nonstop. Over the course of those years in the mid to late 90s, I was traveling, well, I traveled 5 continents and almost 50 countries over that period of time and sold amusement rides throughout the world, which was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a great experience, but it was a real adjustment to get used to the fact that I was never in Utah. I was always on the road, and my life was on an airplane. And I racked up about 1.5 million air miles over that period of time. The point I'd get to you is that as you get into business out of college and start businesses, you may think, you know, this is a great little product and it's going to do well locally. Really, it's a worldwide economy out there, and chances are, if you've got a good product, you will be going international very quickly. Some of the experiences that I had, I guess I'd say, to prepare you, make sure that you're open-minded to different cultures and that you don't try to shove down the throats of your customers the American way of life, because they won't accept it. They'll throw it right back at you. You have to be open-minded to the cultural aspects of the places you're visiting and respect those cultures and adhere to those cultures. If you can learn a little of the language, if you can learn the customs and things like that, that makes you much more attractive to your customers and makes you more successful in business. I spent a lot of time in China and Japan. The Japanese culture is extremely busy. They have a certain way of doing things. Negotiating the Japanese way is a long, drawn-out process, and it goes through a certain procedure, and you need to follow that. You can't bypass it and just cut to the chase and say, look, this is a deal. There's the offer. Take it or leave it. It doesn't work that way, just so you know that. And the same thing in China. China it's a long, drawn-out process also. And it's almost an argumentative type of negotiation that you do with the Chinese. And I learned a lot from that situation. And again, you can't preempt that. If they give you an offer, you have to counter it, and then you have to defend it and prepare a fight to defend it. And then there has to be give and take, and then there'll be arguments, and then they'll gather up and they'll point their finger at you and you know, put you down a little bit, and then they'll leave the room, and you'll hear some yelling and noise, and then they'll come back and negotiate some more. And that's just part of the culture. That's just the way they do things. Middle East, working with people in the Middle East, that's a very interesting approach. You'll negotiate for days on the say a multi-million-dollar contract, and you'll work back and forth, and finally you have a deal. You have an agreement. You shake hands on it. Then you go home. And then you get an email from them that says, the deal is, I'll take what you offered at half the price you quoted it to me. So basically all your negotiations is in the toilet. And then you have to basically leave it alone for a few days and let them stew a little bit, and then you have to counter and you have to play the game again. That's cultural. That's how they do things. The European people that I worked with, every country did things differently. The Germans have their certain way. The English have their certain way. My point is, when you say, I'm going to be in business, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to sell products, I'm going to be successful, you have to make sure you understand your customers. You have to understand how they do business, how they function, and prepare yourself culturally to do business internationally, because it's very different outside the United States. Another experience I had is, again, back working with the amusement industry. Being a young company, startup company, we had products that were not really proven. Very successful products. Our first ride was set up on top of the Stratosphere Tower in Vegas. If any of you have been down there, there's the big tower ride. That was our first product. And it got worldwide attention because it was, 1,000 feet above the strip, and it stood 200 feet on top of that tower, and it went up at about 40 miles an hour, and it was a pretty good ride if you've ever been on that. Lagoon has a couple of them as well, and they're all over the world. But anyway, Six Flags was the big customer at the time, and Six Flags never paid us any attention. They really didn't want anything to do with it. So I took the initiative. When I went to a trade show, I saw the president and CEO of Six Flags, and I approached him briefly in the hall, which, maybe not quite the etiquette, the proper thing to do, but I did. I approached him, I handed him a piece of paper, just stating that I'd like to talk with him about a couple of certain things. When he has some time, I think I've got something that would interest him. Well, surprisingly to me, he called me a few days later and he said, let's talk. So I went to the headquarters and talked with him, and over the course of several months, I was able to negotiate the first sale of an amusement ride to him. Now, it took a lot of negotiating and back and forth, wheeling and dealing to get the first ride in there. But once that happened, that led to 13 of their parks accepting rides, amounting to somewhere around $50 million in sales from that one customer. And my point there is persistence pays. And the other thing, when it comes to working in business, coming up with your own ideas for products and companies and so on, I think you have to view business as every day you have to have a plan of attack. I don't think you can show up at the office and figure out you're going to get to work and do something. I think you have to plan ahead what you're going to do and have a running list of things that need to be accomplished. Always have a plan every day. You talk about business plans and preparing the business plan for your business. I know many people who've prepared business plans, myself included, and in a lot of situations, once you start the business, you forget the plan, and all you're doing is just trying to stay ahead of the problems that are occurring. If you don't have a plan and adhere to that plan on a regular basis, you're doomed to fail. So that's the way I view business each and every day. Have a plan and attack it. And you drive it instead of it driving you. Another thing regarding success in business as I've been out there working is in every situation I try to, well, let me use an example. Back when I was in the electronics business, I worked for a small startup company and we produced top-notch marketing material. Our advertising was top-notch, our brochures were top-notch. Everything we did looked like a professional Fortune 100 company. It looked like we were GM. It looked like we were Procter & Gamble and that type of thing. And when we went to a customer and laid out the expensive brochure, they were amazed at the quality. And they thought, now this is maybe making a false impression, but they thought we were a big corporation. And the products were good, but we were a small corporation. We were several million in sales is all. And we were competing against companies that were 40, 50, 60 million in sales. But we made the impression that we were a big company, and that impressed people, and we got a lot of sales because of that, and that led to great success in that business for a period of time. But the important thing is look the part. I mean, look bigger than you are. And then also that relates into your physical appearance. Dress for success. If you're going into a job interview, if you're going to meet with a customer, I don't care who the customer is, always overdress. If you think they're going to be wearing jeans, you better have a tie on. If you think they're going to have sports jackets, you better have a nice suit. It doesn't mean you have to spend a ton of money on your clothes, but dress nicely, look nice. If you think it's cool to have a beard or that kind of thing, yet you're dealing with people that are probably going to be in their 40s and 50s and maybe 60s, you better shave. If you want the deal, you probably better look the part. You better look professional. And I think that's a very important thing. In trade shows, some people like to downplay that. Well, I'm just going to wear a t-shirt with my logo on it. You know, that might work for a guy who's made it. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, they can show up in jeans and a t-shirt. They made it. But, you know, the story's told of Bill Gates when he started his business, went into IBM. He and his partner, Paul Allen, came in with suits. They bought suits at Kmart, nice ties, and they went in and sold themselves as bigger than they really were. It worked for them. And I think that works in business. I think you need to prepare yourself for that. And remember, if in doubt, overdress. You'll get the deal. You'll seal the deal. You'll get the job. You'll get the contract. You'll impress the customer. I think that's something that's lacking maybe in today's world is we think it's cool to dress down. And that works sometimes, you know, after work. But when it comes to being professional, especially cultural, when you leave this country, if you go to business in an Asian country, you better have a full-on suit with a nice conservative tie on, or don't bother going, because you know they won't take you seriously. So those are some of the things that I've learned from my years in business. Back on the amusement business, our business was bought out by an outside entity, actually a venture capital company. When that happened, the business changed, and there was outrageous pressure put on that small group of us that had made that company happen. There was a group of us that at that point started our own company. Actually, it came from one of the contracts we were working on. We were working with Universal Studios on the Islands of Adventure theme park down in Florida. We had one of the projects down there. They required that we did structural analysis on all aspects of the mechanical ride. And so we didn't have the means of doing that with our company at S&S. And so we started a company that did structural analysis. And there were 3 of us partners that started that and you know, brought in the technical support to make that happen. It cost me $20,000 to start that company. And we did the structural analysis, we're paid well for it, and with the basis of that we started our own company, which led to some very successful contracts. We put 2 additional rides on top of the Stratosphere Tower, the one ride that goes over the edge, the teeter-totter ride, and the spinning ride. Those are both rides that we designed and built. Again, 1,000 feet above the strip, hanging over the strip, you know, dangling bodies. There's a lot of structural analysis and a lot of technical aspects you need to take care of, and structural support, maintaining those heavy rides. Anyway, we were able to do that with the help of the engineering support we were able to hire. Also building machines for the automation industry. Autoleave, the airbag manufacturer, is one that bought a lot of our rides. So anyway, that business took off and has done very well. Now, the downside to starting a business is make sure you get in bed with the right people. Now, don't take me wrong. Make sure your partners, you're clearly understanding what you're getting involved with when you have partners, okay? The situation was, we started this business, we had a contract in front of us and we jumped on it. I put the money down, we started this business. Over the course of several years though, the partnership changed, and the two partners I got involved with actually, they decided that money was the most important thing and taking care of the customer wasn't the most important thing. They got us involved in a lawsuit that we really could have avoided, and were putting pressure on me to basically deceive the customer, which I wasn't willing to do. And over the course of a year, I got myself out of that business. I sold out of that business and moved on. And so that's something you need to be clear. And sometimes you never figure that out when you join up with a partner and start a business. But that's something you need to think about as you start a business, if you start a business, is make sure you know the person that you're going into business with. And make sure you're clear on the direction and future and goals of that business, because when things get really good, people change. And when things get really bad, people change. Remember that. Success ruins people and failure ruins people. So keep that in mind. When the money's flowing, how are we going to act? What are we going to do with the money? How are we going to grow the business? How are we going to take care of our employees? And how are we going to take care of ourselves? And if we get into trouble financially, how are we going to deal with it? So success and failure kills. And that's something that I've learned from business. Along the way, I started a business with my wife as well. It was a retail store. It was a Play It Again Sports franchise, which we started here in Logan about, 12 or 13 years ago. The investment was about $150,000. We started down on Main Street near Walmart. That franchise did very well back in the 90s and early 2000s. New and used sporting goods, and it did very well for us for a few years. The thing I learned, at the same time I was doing the amusement business and my wife was running the business, the positives there, it was great to own your business. You can write off a lot of things on the business. It's fun to have products and to pull them out. And when you need them, you use your own products if you can afford to do that. The downside is managing people. We were hiring a lot of college students, and quite frankly, if a student doesn't feel ownership in that business and doesn't feel like he matters, it's just a job. You know, it's just minimum wage or something like that. And they don't put the time in, and when a customer comes in the door, they really don't care. And so that's something you need to realize is if you're starting a business, you've got to hire the right people and you've got to manage them properly. And my attitude about managing is not to beat people down and threaten to fire people, but make them feel like they own the business, make them feel like they're part of it. And if they succeed, they benefit. And I'm a big believer in bonuses and royalties and commissions and things like that. If people can see success and feel success, they should see it by putting money in their pocket. And that's something that has mattered to me greatly in my career and has motivated me. The other thing I'd throw out regarding owning your own business is, and I hear this from people who talk to me about starting a business. They say, well, I'm going to start this business because I can work on it when I want to work on it, and I can have all this free time to play. I can be skiing all the time, I can own boats, I can hike, I can do whatever I want. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Now, you hear stories about people that start a business, and the business does extremely well. They end up spending 5 or 10 hours a week on the business, but that's next to impossible. That's very rare at best. Chances are you start a business, and to really make it and make enough money on that business so you can survive, you're going to be putting in at a minimum 60 hours and more like 80 to 100 hours a week on that business. And just so you know, that's the downside. As I say, as I started this retail business, which we ran for about 3.5, 4 years before we sold it out, I was traveling pretty much nonstop, but when I was home on the weekends and evenings when I was there, I was in the store working on it, or I was home working on the finances, or I was ordering product and things like that. And it was a lot of work. I was working more hours than I should have. And it's hard on you physically to do that, and mentally. So make sure you understand, if you start your own business, it's just you. It's you, and you're responsible for making it. However, the flip side of that is if you're working for somebody else in today's economy, it means you're also going to have to dedicate your life to that business. Even if you don't own the business, make sure you realize that if you're viewing your job as a 40-hour-a-week job, you're probably not going to last too long. You really have to put your full time and effort into making a success out of that business for your boss. Because if you don't, he's going to find somebody that will. That's the nature of business. Now, if you're a factory worker, yeah, you work your 40 hours and you go home. If that's what you want to do, it's there for you. There's plenty of those opportunities. But if you really want to make it in business and grow and get to the point where you're a leader and you're a manager in the business, it's going to require a lot more time, a lot more effort, a lot more dedication. And that's what you have to realize. To succeed in business requires total dedication to the corporation, whether you own it or whether you're working for somebody else. And there's a lot of you here that will start your own businesses. Obviously, this is an entrepreneurship class. But probably the majority of you will not, or you'll start one and you'll end up working for somebody else. There's nothing wrong with that. But make sure that when you do go into business, that you realize that regardless of whether you own it or whether you work for somebody, you dedicate yourself to that business and to the success of that business. And you don't play both sides and, well, it's just a job. If you view it that way, then you probably need to be looking for something else. Again, things to remember as you attack the business world is your work ethic is extremely, extremely important. And that's something I see lacking in a lot of business is the work ethic. Read into that what you want, but you've got to dedicate yourself. You need to go the extra mile. You need to work long hours. You need to prove to your manager or boss that you're, dare I say the cliche, you're a company man. Understand what I'm saying, company woman, company man, that you're willing to do anything to see that business succeed. Because honestly, in today's economy, a lot of businesses are failing, and a lot of it is the businesses are failing because the employees are not going the extra mile or looking for new opportunities to grow the business and succeed themselves. When choosing a business or when starting a business, do your due diligence and know what you're getting into. Okay, if you're going to hire on with a company, don't just take any job. Make sure you understand that business. As you're going into a job interview or as you're investigating buying a business or starting a business, make sure you understand your competition. Make sure you understand the personalities in the business. Make sure you understand the long-term expenses, the hidden expenses. Understand, as I said earlier, what happens if you succeed. Where are you going from there? What other businesses can you take over? How do you grow that business? Or if you get in problems, how are you going to handle those problems? I think that's extremely important. Also, be organized as you get into business. Prove yourself as a girl, understand, I'm generic here. I'm not being sexist. Make sure you go in and prove yourself as an organized person. How's that? That you're a person that comes in, you handle your list of to-dos, as I mentioned earlier, you follow through. If somebody asks you to do something, you do it in a timely manner, you accomplish every task before you, you reach your goals, and you strive for higher goals all the time. Make sure that happens. Also in the process, make sure you don't make enemies. And I'm talking about competitors, people in the business. Make sure you're watching where you're going. A lot of corporations I've dealt with, competitive corporations, view everyone as an enemy. And in reality, what they do is they build walls around themselves, and they're not able to gather information about their competitors and the outside world because they build these walls. The best companies I dealt with, even though they were competitors, when we go to trade shows, we'd meet with these people, we'd have dinner with them, we'd talk about their successes and their failures, we'd talk about ours. We wouldn't get into corporate secrets, But they had an open relationship with us. We have an open relationship with them. And in the end, I've actually done business with those people on other things, on other projects and products because of those relationships. Make friends in the business. Don't be such a tough person. Don't be so hardcore that you aren't able to work with your fellow employees. If you don't learn to work with other people, you will be the first on the list out the door. Or if you have partners and you take that attitude, you'll be the first one gone. They'll find a way to get rid of you. So keep in mind that that's very important. As I mentioned, know your competition. Your competition, you can succeed because you know the competition, or the competition can eat you up and kill you if you don't understand them and know where they're going. There's a lot to running a business. There's a lot to being in business. You have to have your eyes open all the time. And if you're just focused on this tunnel vision, focusing on one little piece of the business, you may do okay, but you're never going to really get ahead. You have to understand what's going on outside your business to really make it. Also, this is off the subject, but for your own personal health and well-being, I think you need to give service to your community, give service to your church, give service to others. Be willing to volunteer. I think that helps keep your head clear and makes you a more well-rounded person. In my years of business, I served as a mayor of North Logan City. I served as a city councilman for 4 years in North Logan City. I've been on various boards in this area. And you can do it, and it really opens your world and gives you deeper perspectives. Also, take care of yourself physically. Sometimes it's so easy to focus on the business, and that's the most important thing, is the business and maybe family. But in reality, what matters is your physical well-being, if you're able to function day in and day out. So don't forget those kinds of things. And also, if you're not having fun, you probably need to find a new opportunity. If you're stressed out of your mind every day and it's physically beating you down, you probably need to look for something else. If the business you started is killing you, get away from it. If the business you're in is killing you, get away from it. There's other opportunities. Don't jump immediately. Find something before you do, but work your way out of it, because in the end, you've got to enjoy what you do. Okay, I've spewed long enough. Let me open it up for questions. Yes?
I actually came in a little late, so I hope that you haven't answered this. So, give us a little background. So you started SNS, you worked for SNS? Or?
I worked for SNS when it was owned by Stan Checketts. It was a very small company with just a handful of employees, and I started with them early on. I was one of the few who had a college degree. My degree's in marketing, so I did the advertising and the marketing, and ultimately I did all the sales for the company for a period of about 7 or 8 years.
You're not with them anymore?
I'm not. I mentioned it as I talked. He sold the company back in about 2000. And when that happened, it changed. The corporate philosophy changed. It was bought by a venture capitalist who was planning to take us. We were about 40 million in sales at that point. And he had a plan that he wanted to take us to 100 million over about 3 years. Well, we only had a couple of products. And being the guy that was on the front line, I knew it was not possible in any way, shape, or form for that company to make $100 million. And the pressure was outrageous, and I was already under a lot of pressure. So me and several of the other employees started a business, and we fled. We jumped ship.
Did Stan stay with? Or?
Yeah, Stan was only a part owner at that point because he'd sold out. Over the course of years, the business dropped off to about 8 or 10 million, which wasn't enough to maintain the business. And then the venture capitalist bailed out, and Stan and another partner stepped back in and bought back into the business. Stan still owns the facilities, but I don't believe he has any management of it right now. It's owned by an outside company out of New Jersey.
You still run your business structure analysis business?
No, I don't. I sold out of that business about 5 years ago. And that's when I again, because of, and let me just say, connections matter, who you know matters. I had met the Dean of the College of Engineering on a search committee when I was mayor of North Logan, and he got to know me through that. And when the opportunity came up for a development job at the university, and I'd sold out of this business. I was looking for something else. And working for the university, I've loved Utah State. I've been involved here for years on the Big Blue Board and various other committees. And I viewed that as a great opportunity for me to finish up my career. And he knew me, he made me the job offer, and I jumped.
So you're retired right now?
I'm not retired, no. I work full-time for the university. But I did well in business. I mean, business was good to me. I love business. The downside, I'll tell you right now, the downside to business and being a manager in business is it's high pressure. If you're ready for that, it's a great place to be. There are great rewards in business, great opportunities. I've seen, as I said, I've been to 50 countries. I've traveled to every state in the United States. I've seen a lot of great things. I've met a lot of great people, and I've sold products all over the world. Great opportunities. So business offers you that in the right areas. But the downside is it's a lot of work to really succeed. Yes?
How did you balance family time? I mean, you went 1.5 million miles around the world. How did you balance time with your family to the business? Where did you draw the line and say, I've got to
Great question.
separate this?
Great question. Marry smart. That's the first thing. Is I luckily married a wife that was patient and understanding, and I raised 3 kids, or she raised 3 kids. I supported 3 kids, if you know, understand where I'm going. It's tough. It really is. The demands of the business world are sometimes extreme, depending on where you get. I got into the sales and marketing aspect of things, technical sales, and the demands are great. There's a lot of travel involved. There's a lot of demands. I would travel 5 or 6 days, come back from an international trip, get back in the office early, work through the day, and find out I had a customer with immediate demands, say in Denmark. The next day I had to jump on a plane, fly to Denmark. So off I go to Denmark. You get back, you're home for a week, and then you're back to Japan. I did a couple of trips where I flew around the world, multiple stops around the world over a 2 to 3 week period. The tough part is you've got to have a wife or a husband that understands what you're doing and appreciates it. And then the other side is you've got to learn to come down. When you get home, you need to come down and put your business aside and focus on family when it's family time. So I wasn't there. The quantity wasn't great at home, but the quality I feel was great. Somehow my kids got through. 2 of them are college graduates, and the third is a junior in special ed. And so none of them are in jail, so I felt like I did okay. And my wife still sticks around with me, so. Anyway, but it's a lot of work. And you have to make that a major focus in your life if you're going to succeed in that. Let me go here first.
Have you noticed that other entrepreneurs have a similar wife to yours that's laid back? Or have you seen entrepreneurs that have like an uptight wife?
I've seen all types. The successful ones have wives that understand and have their own. They've got their own outside interests, but yet they stay close. I make sure I try to, as I've traveled, I've tried to make contact with my wife every day or internationally. Back in the early days, we didn't have the access to cell phones, but I would still get an AT&T card, and I'd call her from the landline when I could, as often as I could to touch base and see how things were going at home. I think that's really important in this new world with cell phones, and those cell phones will reach anywhere. You know, I'd be in Europe the last few years I was traveling, and I could get a phone call from my kids anytime, anywhere, and that's nice. That's changed it. But I've also had a lot of friends that have had wives that have had a little more. The expectations were a little more intense, and it's tough to keep that up. You either have to quit the job, and a job where you don't travel and you're not gone as much, or you get a divorce. I hate to be so blunt, but that's what happens in a lot of situations. If the career is more important than the marriage, something's got to give. So, yes?
I just had a question. You mentioned when you were starting to play game sports,
Mm-hmm.
creating, for example, ownership opportunities for your employees and having a difficult time with that. Did you find a way to do that with that particular business, or in retrospect, is there something you could have done?
We tried a bonus situation. If they sold a certain amount of product, they would get a bonus. And a couple of the employees stepped up. The others just didn't. And so we had to let some people go. But the problem was they really hurt the business. And I don't know how badly they hurt the business. When somebody walks in the door and they're looking for help and the employee is sitting in the back or laying on a bench and ignoring the customer, I mean, that's not good for the business. Person walks in, he expects to be, you know, treated fairly or asked, how are you doing? Could I help you with anything? And when that doesn't happen, it hurts your business. And so I wasn't there all the time, and my wife wasn't there all the time. You know, we did this as an investment, trying to grow the business, and it's really tough to do. And we had a manager for a period of time, and he did a pretty good job, but even then, he couldn't be there all the time. Yeah, but the bonus works in most situations. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
I just had a question about partnerships. What can you do ahead of time to kind of lay out? Is it kind of a contract?
Yes.
Kind of lay out what
If you're wise, you have a contract, a very detailed contract. And at the time when you're starting a business and the potential, really you don't see it, you've got to get the vision and you've got to lay it out there, because it's going to come back to bite you if you don't. You've got to think about if times get tough, we've got to find cash. Are you willing to mortgage your house? Are you willing to ask parents for money to make that business succeed? What are you going to do? If we have to take a loan, are we willing to put our names on that loan and assume the debt if we don't pay it off? Those are big questions you need to ask. But those are realistic things. And if the business really takes off, what kind of a bonus structure are we going to have? How are we going to take care of our employees? Are we going to give them commission and bonuses? What do you do if an employee, say a sales type employee, reaches his goals and makes more than the owner of the business? Some owners have a real hard time with that. They shouldn't. Let me tell you, I've made more than a lot of the owners I've worked for. And some of them take it well, but most don't. They don't want to see you making more money than them, even though you're out there spending, you know, months and years away from home bringing in the orders. You should welcome that as an owner. Those are questions that need to be addressed. And then if there are disputes or directional differences, how do you settle it? That should be all on paper before you start the business. Because if not, there's just a pretty good chance that those kind of conflicts will split your business apart. I've seen it over and over again. So I would get somebody who's either done a business before or get an attorney involved who can answer those questions, but I would go there. I definitely would go there. Other questions? Are most of you planning to start your own businesses? Are you looking to get into some multinational corporation? I mean, what's your plans?
My question.
Yeah.
How much experience, I know that a lot of us probably don't have a lot of experience in the business field. How much experience do you think would make us successful in going out and starting a business? Does that just kind of depend?
The more experience, the better. I came out of school and started interviewing. This is in the early 80s, and there was a depression going on, at the recession, I should say, at the time, and there wasn't a lot of people hiring. I was sending out resumes constantly. I got a few job interviews, and in every situation, the employer would say, how much experience do you have? And of course, you know, I spent most of my time in college. I had some college jobs, but they weren't really relevant. And he says, you know, you look like a great guy, but you just don't have the experience. And I know you're in college and you can't get the experience, but gosh, we need experience. So anything you can do right now that can gather experience for you, you know, pick jobs right now in college that will give you some kind of a face-to-face experience or some product knowledge experience or some technical experience that you can translate into a job. But to start your own business, you know, a lot of people start it with no experience. You just read some books and come up with a great idea, a great concept for a product or service, and off you go. Sometimes you do well, sometimes you don't, and you know, be prepared. You're gonna fail, and you're gonna succeed, and you're gonna fail. It's inevitable. Did that answer your question? Okay. Other questions? No, back to my question. Are you looking to start your own business, every one of you, or is it whatever happens, or ultimately that's your goal is to own your own business? Okay. Do you have products or services in mind that you're looking to venture out and start the business with, or are you just looking for opportunities? Okay, okay.
Nothing I want to share with anybody.
Yeah, I got you. Because these guys will rip you off. Yeah. Are you, like franchise businesses, is that something you're interested in? Requiring a lot of capital? Do you realize, I mean, do you have the money to start a business? You looking to go low key and kind of work into it? Or any comments there? Yes?
The fiscal conservative in me says I'm going to bootstrap and I'm going to start what I have and
Right.
just kind of go from there.
Right.
But the way things are today, if you're going to start a business, you've got, you have your idea and you baby it. But
Right.
the second that it's ready to explode, you have to be ready. And
You
that
do.
sometimes includes huge amounts of capital.
You do.
And
You do.
so, conservative says I want to bootstrap it so I don't end up tied to a whole bunch of debt. I don't have, I had a guy refer to him as vulture capitalists
Right.
a couple weeks ago, but I don't want to be tied to them or
Right.
responsible to them. I kind of want to do this on my own, but
Right.
you have to look at the reality. If you really want to make it as big as you can imagine,
Yeah.
you have to involve some sort of financing down the
You-
road.
Very good point. Good point. And a lot of people, the pure inventors that I've dealt with, are very reluctant to give up their ideas and go to outside funding. Venture capitalists are out there. In fact, a lot of them are desperate for opportunities to put their money into businesses, but they'll own the business in the process, or they'll own a good share of the business. Take care. You know what my attitude would be if you've got a great idea. That idea means nothing if you can't get it out in front of people. So even if you have to give up a good share of the business to get that out there, you're better off to go with the venture capital money than to not ever see that business succeed. So if you've got a good idea, and the venture capitalist or the person with money will decide if it's a right idea or not. And if it's a good idea, don't squabble over the percentages of the business he's going to own. If he's going to put some money or a royalty into your pocket off the sale of that product or service, I would say you do it. And don't squabble over, well, this concept, this invention is the greatest thing since the personal computer. It may be, but you'll never get it out there if you don't have the money to get it there. So, money rules, capital rules. And going into personal debt for it may put you in a hole you'll never dig out of. And I've seen that from friends too, who think they've got a great idea and they put hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into their product and they fail. And they spend the rest of their life trying to pay off that debt. And that's a sad way to go. So I wish you the very best in your ventures. But also remember, getting some experience with some good businesses around here, some small businesses, is not a bad way to go either. You can learn a lot. You can get the experience you need to take you to the next level. So keep that in mind. Even though you've got a sharp mind for starting your own business, it's not bad to look at how other people do it and see their successes and their failures and their mistakes. And you can capitalize on that and make your own venture even better. Any other questions? Yes?
A quick question with your franchising. How quick did that branch out, or how was that transaction? Was it easy to get to place people in these franchises?
They had a good system. Again, they scrutinized me and my finances. They made sure that I had the money and I had the backing to make the business succeed before they gave me the rights for the territory. The downside of franchises is they do take a piece of your business usually, a piece of your sales. And that may or may not be a bad thing. The thing that really hurt me was we got into a new building and the rent was really the killer for us. The rent was way too high for what we were doing. We had a good business, we started off well, but the rent just over time was a killer. And so you've got to look at all those things. At the time we thought with our projections, our sales projections, we'd be okay. But in the end, on the down months where you have 2 or 3 months that are below your projection, that really eats up your profits. It can really hurt your business. And labor costs and inventory costs and managing your inventory. There's a lot to it in a retail setting. Manufacturing, it's a little different story, but still you have to watch those fixed costs. There's a lot of details to running a business. And just make sure you talk to people, you get experience before you launch into this, because it's those hidden things. Managing people That's huge. Personalities, that can kill a business. In a small business setting, if you have 5 employees and 3 of them hate each other, you're not going anywhere. It's gonna choke your business. So those are kinds of things that you need to be careful of too. So what I'm saying is running, owning, working for a business, it's a complex thing, but it's exciting, it's exhilarating, it's an adrenaline rush. But love what you do. Anything else? Any other questions? Well, I wish you all luck, and thanks for letting me talk to you today.